"I need a wife by tomorrow," the Duke of Quornby said, and he watched the young woman across the parlor go very still, the teacup halfway to her lips. He had expected her to laugh, or to flush, or to summon her aunt and have him thrown from the house. Instead, Marielle Vane set the cup down with a small and deliberate click, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at him as though he were a sum that had come out wrong. "By tomorrow," she repeated. "By noon tomorrow." Julian heard his own voice, flat and clipped, the voice he used with tenants who owed him money and with lawyers who did not. "My grandfather's will contains a clause. If I am not married by my 30th birthday, Quornby Hall and every acre attached to it passes to my cousin Rupert, who will sell the land, turn out 400 tenants and drink the proceeds within a decade. My birthday is the day after tomorrow. I have spent 3 weeks courting suitable young ladies, and every one of their fathers wants a settlement I cannot promise until the estate is secured, which I cannot secure until I am married. It is a knot that eats its own tail. You are sensible. Your family is respectable and poor. I am offering you a duchess's rank, a duchess's income, and my name. I would be grateful for an answer." It was, he knew, an appalling proposal. He had ridden through the night to make it. His boots were still caked with the mud of 2 counties, and there was a fine tremor in his hands that he kept pressed flat against his knee so she would not see it. He had chosen her for the coldest of reasons. She was clever, she was 25 and unwed, and her uncle owed a debt that Julian had quietly bought last spring, which meant the family could not afford to refuse him. He had come prepared to be resented. He had not come prepared to be studied. Marielle rose. She walked to the window and stood with her back to him, looking out at the small walled garden where a rose had gone leggy against the brick. "You have named your reasons," she said. "You have not named a single feeling." "I have none to offer that would be honest," Julian answered. "I will not lie to you on the first day of a marriage. I do not love you. I do not know you. I am asking you to save 400 people who have never heard your name, and to save me, which perhaps matters to no one but myself." She turned, he braced. "Then you must promise me one thing," she said. "One thing, and I will marry you tomorrow at noon." "Name it." "That you will not pretend." Her voice did not shake, though her hands had closed on the folds of her skirt. "I have watched a marriage built on pretending. My mother and father smiled at dinner and did not speak for years. I would rather be plainly unloved than falsely adored. So promise me this: whatever you feel or come to feel or fail to feel, you will tell me the truth of it. No performances. No gallant lies to spare me. If you are cold, be honestly cold. If you are ever anything else, let me know it is real. That is my condition, your grace. Truth, always, even when it is unkind." Julian looked at her for a long moment. It was, he thought, the strangest dowry a woman had ever demanded, not money, not settlements, not a house in town, but honesty, that most inconvenient of currencies. "I promise," he said. They were married the next day at noon, in a cold church with 2 witnesses and a curate who kept sneezing. She wore gray because there had been no time for white, and she did not weep, and when he put the ring on her finger his hand was steady at last. Rupert stood at the back with his arms folded and his face like a slammed door, and when the curate pronounced them wed, the cousin turned on his heel and left without a word, and Julian felt the estate settle back onto its foundations like a house that had stopped shifting in the night. That evening they dined alone at Quornby Hall, at either end of a table built for 30. The candlelight lay between them like a field neither dared to cross. "You may ask me anything," Marielle said, "under the terms of our bargain." Julian considered. "Why did you agree? Your uncle's debt does not oblige you personally. You could have refused and let the family sink and kept your freedom." "That is honest of you." She almost smiled. "I agreed because I am 25 and have watched every door in the county quietly close, because a woman without money or beauty has very few choices, and most of them are worse than a truthful stranger, and because—" She stopped. "The bargain," he reminded her. "Because when you said save 400 people who have never heard your name, you meant it," she said. A cold man would have said secure the estate. You said save. I decided a man who thinks first of his tenants at the worst hour of his life is a man worth risking a life on. I may be wrong, but that is why." Julian said nothing. He was not accustomed to being seen so quickly, and he did not know what to do with it. The weeks that followed were careful ones. Julian had married a stranger, and he set about the work of governing the estate as he always had, rising before the sun, riding the drainage ditches, arguing with the steward over the price of seed corn. He told himself the marriage was a transaction concluded, a clause satisfied, nothing more. He kept his promise not to pretend by the simple expedient of feeling as little as he could manage. But Marielle was not a woman who stayed in her allotted corner of a house. He found her, one gray morning, in the estate office, going through the tenancy ledgers with a pencil behind her ear. "You keep 3 separate accounts of the Barrow Farm rents," she said, without looking up, "and none of them agree. Your steward is either a fool or a thief. I suspect a thief, because a fool would have made them agree to hide himself." Julian crossed the room and looked over her shoulder. She was right. He had suspected it for a year and had never had the patience to prove it. Within a week she had proved it 3 times over, in a clear hand, with dates. He dismissed the steward. He did not tell her that he had lain awake that night thinking not of the money recovered, but of the pencil behind her ear. She learned the tenants' names before he did. She sat with the dying weaver's wife and read to her. She reorganized the still room, taught the youngest housemaid her letters, and challenged Julian at chess in the evenings with a ruthlessness that first offended and then delighted him. When she beat him, she did not pretend she had not. When he beat her, she demanded a rematch. There was no pretending anywhere near her. He had asked for a duchess to satisfy a will. He had somehow acquired a partner, and he did not know at what precise hour the acquisition had turned into something he could not do without. The truth of it came to him on a night in November, when the fever went through the eastern cottages. Marielle went among them without being asked. Julian found her at the 3rd cottage, a shawl over her head against the sleet, spooning broth into an old man who could no longer hold the cup. She had been at it since dawn. Her face was gray with exhaustion, and there was a flush high on her cheeks that he did not like. "You will make yourself ill," he said. "Come home." "They are your people," she said. "That makes them mine. I am not pretending to care, Julian. That was the bargain. I actually care, which is worse because it will not let me leave." She swayed as she stood. He caught her. She was burning. He carried her home himself, would let no one else touch her, and for 4 days the fever had her, and for 4 days the great cold Duke of Quornby did not leave the room. He held the cup to her lips as she had held it to the old man's. He read to her from the tenancy ledgers because it was the only thing in the house he was certain she loved. And once, in the worst of it, she laughed at a figure he read wrong, and he understood that she had heard him, and he put his face down against her hot hand and found that he was weeping, which he had not done since he was a boy. On the 5th morning the fever broke. She woke to find him in the chair beside the bed, unshaven, gray, holding her hand as though it were the last rope over a cliff. "You look terrible," she whispered. "I have not pretended otherwise," he said, and his voice broke on it. She studied him with those clear eyes, weak now but not fooled. "Julian, our bargain, tell me the truth of what you feel, now, while I can hear it." He had promised her honesty on the first day, thinking it a small price. He understood now that it had been the whole of the estate and more. "I feel," he said slowly, "that I married you to save 400 strangers, and that somewhere in these months you became the person I would burn the 400 to keep. That is not honorable, and it is not sensible, and it is entirely true. I do not want a duchess who satisfies a clause. I want my wife. I love you, Marielle, not gallantly, not to spare you, not as any performance. I love you the way I love the land, which is to say I did not choose it and I cannot undo it, and I would not if I could. That is the truth of what I feel. You asked for nothing but the truth. I find I have a great deal of it, and all of it is you." For a long moment she said nothing, and he feared he had frightened her with the size of it. Then her fingers tightened in his. "You kept your promise," she said, "every day. Even when it was unkind, you never once pretended. Do you know how rare that is? I married a stranger for the coldest of reasons, and he turned out to be the one honest man in England." Her eyes filled. "I love you too, Julian. I have for weeks, and I did not tell you because I was waiting for you to say it first and unforced. I would not have a love that came because I asked for it. But you have said it, and it is real, and now I may say it back. I love you." He bent and kissed her forehead, and then, when she turned her face up, her lips gently, for she was still weak, and the candle guttered, and neither of them minded the dark. They did not have a grand wedding in the end. They had already been married for weeks. But in the spring, when the roses had been cut back and had bloomed the better for it, they stood again before the curate, the same one, no longer sneezing, and spoke their vows a second time, not to satisfy any will, but because they chose to freely, before the whole village that Marielle now knew by name. She wore white this time. There had been time. And when the curate said the words, Julian did not stand stiff and clipped as he had the first time. He looked at his wife across the small distance that no longer felt like a field to be crossed, and he told her the truth, out loud, so that 400 people who now knew both their names could hear it. "Everything I feel for you," he said, "is real, I promise it. I will promise it every day for the rest of my life." "See that you do," said the Duchess of Quornby, laughing and weeping at once, "for I shall always know if you pretend." He never did, not once in all the long years that followed.